Hi, today I'm going to be talking about what I think is the Beatles song that is the most Beatley. So I decided to do this video just for something different to have a go at doing. And I thought I'll look at the Beatles songs. I won't look at every single Beatles song, but I'll take, I think I took about 15 Beatles songs. And what from right across their catalogue, from early ones to late ones. And I just came up with some criteria that I think is important for when you're discussing Beatles songs. So the criteria that I came up with, I'll just read them out to you. So the first one is collaboration. So is it a song that, like maybe Hey Jude, that even though it's a Beatles song, is very much a Paul McCartney song? So that's not really one that would score very high on the collaboration front. Whereas there's other songs where you can really hear that everyone, or at least two of them, had a big part in writing them. Some of my favourite Beatles songs are George Harrison ones, but I think they do sound like George Harrison songs more than they sound like Beatles songs, if that makes any sense. So they wouldn't score so high on the collaboration front. The next one, melodic. How melodic are they? Well, one of the things I really like about Beatles songs is how melodic they are. Some of their melodies are absolutely amazing, and I think all three of the main songwriters were just brilliant at coming up with melodies. I think Paul McCartney, you might disagree with this if you do put in the comments, but I think Paul McCartney is one of the best melody writers ever. So you think about good melody writers, Mozart was pretty good, Beethoven was pretty good. There's certain ones that, yeah, they're pretty good at writing melodies. I think McCartney is one that should be mentioned when you're talking about all these melody writers. I think he's amazing at melodies. So for me, I think Lennon was brilliant at melodies as well, but I think for me, a Paul McCartney melody featuring in a Beatles song is going to score very high on that section. Next one is Ringo's Presence. So how distinctive is the drum part? And I'm not a drummer, but I've spoken to drummers about this in the past, and I think Ringo's drumming is very distinctive, and he's really well known for his drum fills. So if you've got, he plays fills that other drummers wouldn't think of, and they're not necessarily that technical, but he just plays things that are unique to his way of playing. So that's one of the things I was scoring these songs on, is how much of a Ringo presence is there, how interesting is the drumming on it, or how distinctive is the drumming. The next one was vocal harmonies. I don't think that's the most important thing in terms of how Beatley a song is, because there's other bands. I mean, they were brilliant at the vocal harmonies, and they did that in most of their songs, but there are other bands that also did that well, like the Beach Boys or Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and there's other bands from around the same kind of time that were also very good at that, the Byrds. So that is an important thing. It does make something very Beatley, but it's not the most important thing. And most of their songs score high on that anyway, so it's not going to be a deciding factor, that one. My next one was studio innovation. There are certain things Beatles did in the studio that hadn't ever been done before. Very experimental. I know George Martin had a lot to do with that, but as a band, including him, they really did do things that people hadn't thought of before, and they were very creative in terms of like doing weird things in the studio. Next one is odd time signatures or speed shifts. So some of their songs, they literally change speed in the middle. I think Strawberry Fields Forever does, I think. But they changed the speed of the song, and they definitely changed the time signature in songs. Something like Across the Universe, there's bars of 3/4, bars of 5/4, even though most of the song is in 4/4. They changed time signature. They put in odd bars that aren't the same time signature as the rest of the song, and that's a really cool thing that I like about a lot of their songs. They didn't do it so much on their early stuff, but so that's something that I think is a definite Beatley thing. Next one is lyrics. Obviously they were good lyricists, the three main songwriters. So this one's quite simple. How interesting or unique or good are the lyrics for the song? Is it good? Could you read the lyrics for the song without the music and still think it's a good piece of writing? The last criteria here, I quite like this one. This is musical mystery. And what I've put here is sort of notes for myself. I put, they sometimes wrote things which musicians are still discussing and debating 60 years later. So an example of that, probably the best example, is the first chord at the beginning of A Hard Day's Night. There's a lot of discussion, or there has been for 60 years, there's been a lot of discussion about what that chord is. And there's some interesting YouTube videos where people have analysed it with software and worked out what they actually did. And it's multiple instruments all playing things that sometimes shouldn't go together to create that chord. So musical mystery, there's some other things in Beatles songs where they did things, it's sort of tied in with studio innovation a little bit, this, but they did things that we're not quite sure how they did it or what they were doing. I quite like that one. Right, so what I did was scored these songs and came up with the most Beatles song, or the most Beatly Beatles song. Now the one I came up with, before I tell you, maybe comment before you hear this next bit, comment what you think it should be, or pause this and think about what you think it should be. Obviously this is a very personal thing, just the way I've worked this out, just on my impression of these songs. I'm not saying this is the best Beatles song or anything like that, it's just the most Beatly Beatles song. So the one I came up with is A Day in the Life, because the criteria I gave it, let's have a look. Collaboration, right? So it's very much a Lennon and McCartney song, and there's a Lennon section which is repeated, and there's a McCartney section, and they're like two different songs. And I think originally there were two different songs. So it scores higher than any other song on that. Melodic, yeah, they both wrote melody, or Lennon and McCartney both wrote melodies for this song, and both are brilliant melodies. I think, even though I probably prefer McCartney's melodies overall, I think in this song, in A Day in the Life, I prefer Lennon's melody. I love the melody on that, and I love the whole Lennon section. I prefer it to the McCartney section. Ringo's Presence, yeah, it's got those great drum fills in the Lennon section, just brilliant. Vocal harmony, there's a bit of vocal harmony in this, but it's not a big part of this song, so it didn't score that high for this. Studio innovation, there's the chord at the end, that big chord, that piano chord that then just goes on for ages. I don't know quite how they did that, but that ties in with musical mystery, doesn't it? And there's also the build-up bit with the discordant bit, the sort of chromatic thing that goes up and up and up. That's really cool. Loads going on. Odd time signatures, speed shifts. There's a bit rubato, sort of out of time on that build-up bit. Has a definite shift in pace at one point where it changes to the McCartney section, the woke up, got out of bed part. Very different change of pace, and there's a more subtle one later on, so it scores quite high for this. I don't think there was an actual time signature change in it, unless I've missed it. Key change, odd chords. It's got a couple of key changes in the song, and it's got that chromatic bit of that build up that goes up and up and up and up. That's that build up before you get to the next section. So it scores high there. Musical mystery and lyrics. The lyrics are great in this song. I think it's like two songs stuck together, both really good. Nothing too unusual about the McCartney section. It's just like day to day. You know, he got up and got out of bed and what happens, but he's written it really perfectly. But it's a little bit banal. It's meant to be, I suppose. The Lennon section's a bit more interesting lyrically, I think. Yeah, and musical mystery, I've already sort of discussed that a little bit. It scores pretty high for this, although it's not the highest scorer for this one. So overall, yeah, my little scoring system I came up with, I won't bore you with the individual songs and the scores, but what I came up with was A Day in the Life as being the most Beatly Beatles song. I'd love it if you disagreed with this and told me in the comments what you think is the most Beatly song. That'd be great. I'd like it if you agreed with me as well. Put that in the comments, but I'd really like it if you disagree, because I want to know what I've missed. And I did this in a bit of a rush, so I could have put bit more time into it perhaps and come up with something different, but I'm not sure if I would have come up with something different. There were one or two other songs that were close. I think Strawberry Fields Forever was pretty close. Penny Lane might have been as well. But yeah, Day in the Life, the most Beatles song. Okay, thanks for watching.